The Whitmore estate was buzzing with chatter and clinking glasses the evening Eleanor Whitmore made her bold declaration. Her father, Charles Whitmore, had once again filled their grand hall with wealthy businessmen, eager investors, and young men he subtly paraded before her, hoping one might capture her hand in marriage. Eleanor, however, had grown weary of it all, the forced smiles, the hollow compliments, the sense that no one saw her as anything more than a prize attached to her family's fortune. She slipped away from the glittering ballroom into the vast garage, seeking refuge in the smell of old leather and rust. There, under a dim hanging bulb, sat her father's most prized but neglected possession, a 1969 Chevrolet Camaro, its once glorious frame now faded, chipped, and gathering dust. The car had been his dream in his youth, a symbol of freedom before business and wealth consumed his life. For years, mechanics had tried and failed to restore it, and now it was nothing more than a relic of untapped glory. Eleanor stared at it, and a reckless thought sparked in her mind, a test, perhaps, or a shield against the men who never truly cared for her. When she returned to the party, she interrupted her father's introduction of yet another suitor by pointing to the garage door and boldly announcing, "Whoever can restore that Camaro to its former glory will have my hand in marriage." The room erupted in startled laughter, some assuming it was a joke, others scoffing at the impossibility of the task. Her father, however, surprised everyone by nodding, his eyes gleaming with a mixture of challenge and approval. "You heard her," he said, raising his glass. "That car is part of this family. If a man can bring it back to life, maybe he's worthy of my daughter too." Most of the wealthy young men chuckled and shook their heads, unwilling to dirty their hands with grease or spend sleepless nights in a garage. Eleanor smirked, believing her declaration would scare them all away. But then, from the back of the room, a quiet voice spoke up, "I'll do it." The crowd turned to see Daniel Cole, a modest mechanic who had been invited by a family friend to fix a different car that day, standing with his hands shoved into his pockets, eyes steady and calm. Eleanor's brows rose, her interest piqued. She hadn't expected anyone to take her seriously, especially not him. Daniel Cole was nothing like the polished men Eleanor's father paraded through their home. He had no designer suit, no silver spoon in his mouth, and no air of entitlement in his voice. He was a man of calloused hands and oil-stained shirts, someone who worked long hours in a small-town garage repairing old trucks and family cars for neighbors who often paid him in kindness rather than money. To the wealthy eyes in the room, he seemed utterly out of place, and their laughter followed him as though the very idea of a humble mechanic rising to meet Eleanor's challenge was absurd. But Daniel did not waver. Instead, he walked toward the Camaro with a calm, assessing gaze, circling it like a doctor studying a patient. Eleanor, arms folded and skeptical, followed him into the garage, curious to see if his bold words were more than just a bluff. "You don't know what you're signing up for," she said, tilting her chin toward the faded paint and broken engine. Daniel crouched beside the car, running his rough fingers along its body as though it were alive, his touch careful and almost reverent. "Maybe not," he replied with a small, lopsided smile, "but sometimes the hardest things are the ones worth fixing." Something in his tone silenced her retort, and for the first time, Eleanor wondered if there might be more to him than she had assumed. Over the days that followed, Daniel returned to the estate each morning, often before the sun had fully risen, and worked tirelessly in the garage. Eleanor watched from the sidelines at first, convinced he would give up when the rust and broken parts overwhelmed him as it had so many others, but he never did. He spent hours dismantling, cleaning, and rebuilding, humming softly under his breath as if he and the Camaro shared a secret conversation. His dedication unsettled her, for it was not born of ambition or greed but something quieter, an unshakable determination that seemed to come from within. As she stood in the doorway one evening, watching him work under the dim light with sweat dripping down his brow, Eleanor felt her skepticism waver. She realized with an uncomfortable twist in her chest that he wasn't chasing her hand or her father's wealth, he was chasing the soul of the car, and perhaps, in a way she couldn't yet name, he was beginning to reach hers too. The Camaro began to change slowly, piece by piece, as if Daniel were breathing life back into its tired frame, and with each passing day Eleanor found herself drawn more to the garage than to the glittering halls of her family's estate. At first, she told herself she was simply curious, wanting to witness how long it would take before he gave up, but soon she was staying longer, sitting on an overturned crate, handing him wrenches, and brushing streaks of dust from her skirts as though she belonged there. The long hours together blurred into conversations that surprised her. Daniel did not ask about her inheritance or her father's empire but instead asked about her childhood, her favorite books, the things she longed to do if she were free from the gilded cage of wealth. He listened without judgment, his eyes steady and kind, and for the first time Eleanor felt as though someone saw her for herself, not the heiress but simply a woman. One late night, sparks danced from Daniel's welder as Eleanor leaned against the wall, the orange glow flickering across his face, and she realized she no longer cared if the Camaro roared to life again because what mattered was the quiet warmth blooming between them. Her laughter rang freely in the garage, unpracticed and real, as he teased her about not knowing the difference between a wrench and a ratchet, and she caught herself staring at the grease smeared across his cheek with an ache she could not explain. Yet, not everyone was blind to the shift. Her father often stood at the edge of the garage, arms crossed, watching with a sharp, calculating gaze. He admired Daniel's skill but remained stern, testing him with silence, unwilling to believe a mechanic could be worthy of his daughter. Eleanor, though, began to feel torn between the heavy weight of expectation and the unexpected freedom she found in Daniel's presence. One evening, as the engine parts gleamed freshly polished and the smell of gasoline hung thick in the air, she caught his eyes lingering on her a heartbeat too long, and in that moment, Eleanor understood she was no longer waiting for a man to win her hand through a challenge, she was already giving her heart away, piece by piece, like the bolts Daniel was tightening back into the Camaro's soul. The day of reckoning arrived with the sun spilling gold across the Whitmore estate, and the garage, once dim and forgotten, now stood like a stage awaiting its final performance. The Camaro gleamed beneath the light, its once rusted body now polished to a mirror shine, its chrome catching every flicker of dawn, and when Daniel slid into the driver's seat, the crowd that had gathered held its breath. Eleanor's father stood at the front, arms clasped behind his back, his stern face betraying neither approval nor doubt, while guests and suitors, who had long abandoned the challenge, murmured with disbelief. Daniel turned the key, and the engine roared to life with a sound so powerful it silenced the entire estate. It was not just a car being revived but a piece of history reborn. Cheers erupted, but Daniel did not bask in the applause, his eyes sought only Eleanor. Stepping out of the Camaro, his shirt streaked with grease and his hands scarred from weeks of labor, he walked toward her, every step steady and sure. Her father cleared his throat as if preparing to announce the outcome, but Daniel spoke first, his voice firm yet gentle. "I didn't fix this car to win a marriage or prove myself to anyone," he said, his gaze locked on Eleanor's. "I fixed it because it deserved to run again, because it was worth saving. Just like you are worth seeing for who you really are, not for what you represent." The word struck her heart with a force she had not expected, and for the first time in her life, Eleanor felt completely free, free to choose, free to love without conditions. The crowd waited, expecting her father to dictate her fate, but Eleanor stepped forward, her voice trembling yet clear as she whispered, "Then I choose you." The murmur of shock rippled through the onlookers, but Eleanor didn't care. She saw only the man who had worked tirelessly not for a prize, but for the simple belief in restoration, in second chances, in love that was real. Her father, after a long silence, finally nodded, a reluctant smile tugging at his lips as he admitted softly, "Perhaps you've fixed more than just the car, son." And as Daniel's hand closed gently around Eleanor's, the Camaro rumbled behind them like a witness to their promise, its rebirth mirroring the love that had grown quietly, steadily, and unshakably between them.